On September 15th, 1954, in the middle of a New York City street, Marilyn Monroe stood over a subway grate while her white dress flew up around her waist. Thousands of people watched. Cameras flashed. The crowd cheered. And 50 feet away, her husband Joe DiMaggio stood in the shadows, his face twisted with rage, watching the woman he loved being turned into a spectacle. Within minutes, he'd storm off. Within weeks, their marriage would be over. This is the true story of the most famous marriage in Hollywood history. The story of a wife, a husband, and the studio executives who went to war over who owned Marilyn Monroe. They met in 1952 at the Hollywood Brown Derby restaurant. Joe DiMaggio, the greatest baseball player of his generation, retired and living quietly. Marilyn Monroe, the rising blonde bombshell that every studio in Hollywood wanted to own. She didn't know who he was. She had to be briefed on his Yankees career, his fame, his status as an American hero. But when they sat down for dinner, something clicked. He was reserved, old-fashioned, a man who valued privacy above all else. She was glamorous, ambitious, desperate to be taken seriously as an actress. They were opposites, and for a while, that worked. They dated for over a year. Quiet dinners, nights at home. He hated publicity. He hated the cameras. He hated the way Hollywood packaged her, the tight dresses, the breathless voice, the dumb blonde act. But he loved her, and she loved him. Or at least, she loved the idea of him, the baseball hero, the man who didn't need Hollywood, the man who saw her as more than just a body. On January 14th, 1954, they got married at San Francisco City Hall. It was supposed to be simple, a civil ceremony, no Hollywood circus. But the press turned it into a national event. Joltin' Joe marries the blonde bombshell, America's couple, the hero and the sex symbol. The studios loved it. DiMaggio hated it, because this wasn't a marriage to him. This was a branding opportunity, and he was already losing her. For their honeymoon, they traveled to Japan. DiMaggio was there for a baseball promotional tour. Marilyn played the dutiful wife, smiling for photos, staying in the background. But then, while they were in Japan, the U.S. military invited her to perform for troops stationed in Korea. She said yes. DiMaggio said no. She went anyway. In February 1954, Marilyn flew to Korea alone and performed 10 shows in 4 days in freezing temperatures for over 100,000 soldiers. She wore a tight dress. She sang. She posed. The men went wild, and Marilyn came back glowing. She told friends it was the first time she'd ever felt like a real star. DiMaggio was furious. This wasn't what he'd signed up for. He didn't marry Marilyn Monroe, the movie star. He married Norma Jean, the woman. But Hollywood wasn't going to let Norma Jean exist. They needed Marilyn, and Marilyn needed them. That's when the war started. Not a war with guns or lawyers. A war of image. A war of control. On one side, Joe DiMaggio, who wanted his wife at home. Private, respectable, his. On the other side, 20th Century Fox, who saw Marilyn as the most profitable asset in Hollywood and wanted her more public, more sexual, more exposed. And caught in the middle, Marilyn herself, torn between the man she loved and the career she'd sacrificed everything to build. DiMaggio made his position clear. He didn't want her doing cheesecake photos. He didn't want her playing dumb blondes. He didn't want her flaunting her body for the world to see. But Fox didn't care what DiMaggio wanted. They had her under contract. They owned her time, her image, her body. And they were going to use it. Every revealing dress, every sultry pose, every breathless line of dialogue. It was all calculated. It was all designed to keep Marilyn Monroe the biggest star in the world. And it was tearing her marriage apart. The breaking point came in September 1954. Marilyn was filming The 7-Year Itch in New York. There's a scene where her character stands over a subway grate and the air from below blows her white dress up. It's iconic now. It's on posters, t-shirts, in every film history book. But the night they filmed it, it was a nightmare. Instead of shooting the scene quietly on a closed set, 20th Century Fox staged it as a public event. They invited the press. They invited photographers. They let thousands of people crowd the street to watch. Over and over, Marilyn stood on that grate. Over and over, the fan blew her dress up to her waist. Over and over, she laughed and posed and played the part while the crowd cheered and the cameras clicked. Joe DiMaggio was there, watching, standing in the back, arms crossed, face dark. He watched his wife being turned into a sexual spectacle in front of thousands of strangers. He watched her laugh. He watched her pose. He watched the crowd of men leering and shouting, and something inside him broke. Multiple witnesses said DiMaggio walked off the set in a rage. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't wait for her. He just left. And when Marilyn got back to the hotel that night, they had a fight that ended any hope of saving the marriage. Some biographers suggest it got physical. Others say it was just words. But either way, the damage was done. DiMaggio had watched Hollywood humiliate his wife for profit, and Marilyn had chosen the dress, the cameras, the fame over him. 3 weeks later, on October 6th, 1954, Marilyn Monroe filed for divorce. She appeared in front of reporters with her lawyer, Jerry Giesler, and announced she was seeking a divorce on the grounds of mental cruelty. There are photos from that day. Marilyn in dark glasses, her face streaked with tears. She looked devastated. And maybe she was, but she also looked free. The marriage lasted 274 days. Less than 9 months. America was shocked. The press went into overdrive. Who was the villain? Was it Joe, the jealous, controlling husband? Was it Marilyn, the ambitious starlet who chose fame over family? Or was it Hollywood, the machine that chewed up marriages and spit out box office receipts? The truth is, it was all three. DiMaggio wanted a wife. Fox wanted a product. And Marilyn wanted to be both. But you can't serve two masters. You can't be a sex symbol and a housewife. You can't belong to the world and belong to one man. Something had to give. And in the end, it was the marriage. But here's the part most people don't know. The divorce didn't end their story. It complicated it. After the marriage ended, DiMaggio stayed in Marilyn's life. Not as a husband. Not even as a lover most of the time. But as something else. A protector. A constant. The one man who never wanted anything from her except her. In 1961, after Marilyn's divorce from playwright Arthur Miller, after a breakdown and a hospitalization in a psychiatric facility, it was Joe DiMaggio who came to her rescue. He helped get her released. He helped her find better care. He stayed by her side when Hollywood had moved on to the next blonde, the next body, the next broken girl they could sell. Some say they talked about remarrying. Some say they were planning it. The truth is murky. But what's clear is this. Joe DiMaggio never stopped loving her. And Marilyn, in her own complicated way, never stopped needing him. On August 5th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her home in Los Angeles. Overdose. Prescription pills. She was 36 years old. And when the news broke, it was Joe DiMaggio who took control. He arranged her funeral. He kept the Hollywood crowd away, the studio executives, the hangers-on, the politicians who'd used her. He made sure her funeral was small, dignified, private, the way he'd always wanted her life to be. And then, for 20 years, Joe DiMaggio sent red roses to Marilyn's grave. Twice a week. Every week. 20 years. He never remarried. He never moved on. Friends said he did it out of love, but also out of guilt. Guilt that he couldn't save her. Guilt that his jealousy and his temper had pushed her away. Guilt that maybe, just maybe, if he'd been less controlling and more understanding, she'd still be alive. When Joe DiMaggio died in 1999, his attorney said his last words were, "I'll finally get to see Marilyn." Whether that's true or Hollywood mythology, no one knows for sure. But it sounds true. It feels true. Because Joe DiMaggio spent the last 37 years of his life living in the shadow of a marriage that lasted 274 days. The night of the subway grate scene, September 15th, 1954, wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was proof that Hollywood doesn't care about love. It cares about image. It cares about profit. It cares about the moment the dress flies up and the cameras click and the money rolls in. Joe DiMaggio wanted to protect Marilyn from that. But you can't protect someone who doesn't want to be protected. You can't save someone who thinks being a star is the same thing as being loved. Marilyn Monroe chose Hollywood. Joe DiMaggio chose her. And in the end, Hollywood won. But it didn't keep her. It used her, broke her, and moved on. Joe DiMaggio stayed. For 20 years, he sent roses. For 37 years, he mourned. And when he died, his last thought was of her. The studio executives went to war over Marilyn's image. Joe DiMaggio went to war for her soul. He lost, but at least he fought. And that's more than Hollywood ever did.